Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and talk to you today about how to dig out of debt and top financial tips from me. So just as a little bit of background, a little bit more background, I am an attorney. I have been practicing in the area of consumer and business debt relief now for over 20 years. I have experience with consumers and business owners negotiating and resolving debts like credit cards, student loans, business lines of credit, mortgages, just about everything under the sun. I have negotiated markers in casinos and aviation debt, you name it. If it's debt, then I can negotiate it. So with that said, I feel like there's a lot of information out there that's sort of misinformation. So I love this opportunity to speak to you today about how to dig out of debt and really understand from the front lines what it is that you need to do to help be successful in managing not only your financial goals, but getting out of debt and being able to manage it. One of the things that I often say about digging out of debt and being out of debt is that there is no way to be completely out of debt. So I want to start the conversation a little bit about being in debt and managing it, because the truth is that debt is okay and it can work for you and it can bring about a lot of benefits to your life financially and otherwise. So the webinar is not about how to be out of debt and stay out of debt. It's about how to dig out of it and understand what position that you're in and how to achieve your goals, and also be able to understand what's realistic for you. But you need to take some of that with a grain of salt, in the sense that it has to apply to you personally. So just because something worked for somebody else doesn't mean that it works for you. Everybody has a financial DNA, and yours is just as unique as somebody else's. So even if you have American Express or Discover or student loan, that doesn't mean that your accounts will resolve and be paid off the same way as somebody else's. So I wanted to kind of get that off of our, and make that super clear so that everybody understands, what to expect. I did write a book called Life in Debt, so that's available, and it's a pretty basic book. It's something that you can take a look at on your own time and help you make some better decisions about your finances if this presentation is not enough for you. So our objective obviously is to get out of debt, but to learn to manage debt in a different way. So the differences today that you're going to learn about, and I think they're so key to understand, is about debt consolidation. What does that really mean? Debt settlement, credit counseling, and bankruptcy. I want to talk to you about the pros and cons of each, and certainly understand what that means for you in terms of what makes sense for you. There is so much, and I'm going to call it misinformation, on the internet about each one of those categories. It's scary. So I want to clear the air on all of that and have you leave today feeling like you totally get it, you know it makes sense, and how it's going to help you or anybody else that might come to you, because you may not be in debt, but you might have clients that are, you might have a relative that is, and you want to be able to say, hey, you know what? I learned from an expert, somebody who does this day in and day out and knows how to do it. So let's start with the topic of debt consolidation. And I apologize ahead of time for speaking quickly. It's just that we have so much information to cover, and I want to be able to get through it all and also leave some time for questions. So just so you know, I'm always available, and at the end, you'll be able to have my contact information, and you can shoot me any questions if we don't cover something here today. So let's talk about debt consolidation. Debt consolidation is a very general term. It encompasses a lot of different things within it. It can encompass bankruptcy. It can encompass debt settlement. It could mean a loan. It could just mean the consolidation or putting together of debts. So that could be, again, rolling it over. It could be a balance transfer, a lot of different things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're reducing debt by consolidating it. Yes, you might be consolidating payments, you might be consolidating accounts, but again, that consolidation is an overly broad term and can have a lot of different meanings. So when you're looking at debt consolidation, make sure you understand what you're consolidating. So the other piece of debt consolidation that a lot of people don't understand is that it doesn't mean that you're getting out of debt. So you can consolidate your debt, but that doesn't mean that you're out of debt. It just means that you've kind of moved it from one type of debt to another. So it doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do either. So if you want to understand really what's happening with your debt in order to make the best possible decision. The truth is, you need to understand what's happening in your personal finances. What's happening with your money? Is too much of it going out? Do you have a lot of credit cards? You have 20 of them? Do you have a lot of student loans that you can't either consolidate into one payment or refinance? So again, in order to know what the best route is for you, you have to know what's happening with your finances. So you have to do a budget. You have to understand where your money's coming in and where it's going to. Where are you bleeding? And kind of like finances when get sick. And that's why you might be looking for some options in terms of resolving your debt, because your finances are showing symptoms and signs of being ill. So when you're looking at symptoms and signs of being ill, if it was you as a human being, you would say, I have a cough, I have a runny nose, my body aches. It's the same thing with your finances. You have to find out where the pain points are. Is it your percentage of your housing expenses, like 50%? So you make $5,000 a month, but $2,500 of it goes to your housing expense. That's a sign or a symptom of an illness. So your credit cards, do you have, like I said earlier, 20 of them? That could be a sign or a symptom of an illness. So once you understand what's going on and what's happening, then you can take these points and decide, okay, consolidation makes sense for me, or another area might make more sense. So with that said, debt consolidation is just one mode of re-managing your accounts. And I kind of use that term. It's not a term used often, but when you're looking at the management of your accounts, you are trying to decide how to pay them off in the best possible way. So debt consolidation is broad, and it includes a lot of different avenues. Again, loans, settlement, bankruptcy, balance transfers, all can fall under debt consolidation. Now, debt consolidation isn't necessarily bad. It actually could be a good thing. So you could consolidate your loans into one payment. So if you have 5 different loans from college and you want to put them into one payment, that might be what the problem is, that you just have too many loans. You could lower your interest rate through debt consolidation. That might be the issue with paying off some of your debt. So again, through the debt consolidation process, you'll find the answers that you need, but you have to be able to understand what the question is. And the question is, what's wrong with my finances? And when you answer that question, you'll be able to plug in a solution. So the next area that falls underneath a debt consolidation umbrella would be debt settlement. Debt settlement comes with it such a negative connotation. And I have to say, done right, it's an amazing tool to resolve and get your debt under control. So understand what debt settlement means. Let's take the debt word out. Same thing with consolidation. If we remove the word debt and we just look at the word consolidation or settlement, they have different meanings. Settlement means you are coming to a new agreement with your creditor, generally for less than what you owe them, and you're changing the interest rate. As a general rule, debt settlement could mean that you take a $10,000 balance and you turn it into $5,000 in payments. In order to get to a debt settlement option, you have to be behind. That's the first inside tip when it comes to debt settlement. No creditor is going to renegotiate the terms of your agreement with you to reduce what you owe them if you are current and making on-time payments. It's just never going to happen. In my world, we don't advise people to stop making payments. But what I can tell you is that the debt settlement world is not effective if you're current. Now, that might scare you, and I would encourage you to not be frightened by that fact. But it might scare you to say, debt settlement's not for me because I can't go behind. I don't want to take those chances. I can't live with it. But you might say to yourself, you know what? The debt settlement may work for me because I'm okay going behind. It's temporary. It's 1 step back and 2 steps forward. And the change in my budget is so substantial that it makes sense for me to do that. So the reason why I state it like that is because I'm not judgmental in any way why somebody has debt or the reasons or the ways that they go about it. I just want to make sure that you as a consumer understand the differences so that you can make the right decision. Now, when we're talking about debt settlement, there are a lot of nuances. So I'm just going to pick a couple of them. One, be super careful who you work with in the debt settlement arena. Lots of companies come in and out, fly by night. There's also lots of very large companies that are out there. Just a one size fits all doesn't mean it works for you. You want to make sure that if you choose the debt settlement route, that you choose to work with somebody who's reliable, who understands your needs, who's been in the business a really long time, and who's not making you any definitive promises. Huge red flag. The moment somebody says to you, I can promise you what I can resolve your debt for, I could settle it for, giving you an exact dollar amount, percentage, or time frame, that should be your red flag to say, thank you very much, goodbye. Because in the debt settlement world, which I've been in now for over 20 years, I can tell you there are no guarantees. There's absolutely no guarantee what any creditor will do at any point in time. It's a complete unknown. And if I could make the prediction about what a creditor could do, I would be Oprah rich. It just is impossible. It's a huge unknown. And that's why I tell people that if you are talking about doing a debt settlement plan, which could work great for you, then you want to be able to work with a very reliable and relatable company who understands you and is not going to leave you out there in terms of dealing with taxes that come along with it, your credit report, issues related to debts coming up later, and being sued. So the next type of a debt consolidation is what's called a credit counseling. It's often called a consumer credit counseling service, CCCS. They fall under the umbrella of not-for-profits. And I want to put this caveat out there. Just because something is a not-for-profit doesn't mean that the people who work there or the people who own it don't earn money. They do. Not-for-profit is a tax status. And yes, they, at the end of the year, that they're supposed to not make a profit and relate that and report that, to the taxing bureaus. That doesn't mean that those who run it and own it aren't being paid. They are. And that doesn't mean that you're not paying for it. You are. So with that, don't be sidetracked by the fact that something is a not-for-profit. So you want to be super careful with that, because you don't want an organization that's hiding behind a not-for-profit status. So be careful with that. The consumer credit counseling business is really about reducing the interest rates. And that's great. And reducing interest rates should be a goal of yours. And in some cases, if you have really good credit, you can call up a creditor and you can say, hey, I see that I'm at 18 or 24%, but I pay my bill all the time. And I notice that I have a really good credit score. Can you reduce my interest? And many times you might be able to get that through. In a credit counseling service, a number of things happen that may or may not work for you. One, it's a long process. Two, it'll be on your credit report. Three, the creditors have to agree to the consumer credit counseling's offer. So you're not necessarily current on those either. And because it's reported on your credit report, anybody who checks your credit will see that you're going through this process. That's not the case in debt settlement. When we do debt settlement for clients, it is not reported by us or the creditor that you're in debt settlement. It is ultimately reported what happens with the debt, but not the process that you're going through. So super important to understand that. And consumer credit counseling can work if you're having difficulty creating a budget, if you really just need to reduce the interest rates, and they do sometimes offer some money management workshops and educational resources. And sometimes you have to do a consumer credit counseling as a prerequisite to filing bankruptcy. So the idea is to teach you and talk to you about how to manage your debts and your money so that you don't have this issue again in the future. It is a tool under debt consolidation, and it could be successful if those are the needs that make sense for you. Bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a very big topic, so we're going to cover only kind of two of them today. One of them, there are two types of basic consumer bankruptcy. One is a Chapter 7, and one is a Chapter 13. Both of them are plans that are submitted to the bankruptcy trustee and have to be approved, and both require what's called a means test. So here's the big difference. Chapter 7 means it's a complete and total wipeout of your debt. You say, I have this debt, I can't pay it. They say, okay. They check the means test to make sure that your income and your household corresponds with the requisite percentages. If you qualify, that's it, it's gone. It does stay on your credit report for 10 years, and bankruptcy does have a number of impacts, including on your licenses, on your insurance, security clearance. It depends on the type of job you have, but it will stay there for a long time. So that's something to consider, because it could impact your rates, certainly in insurance and other areas. Chapter 13 has the same consequences, but the Chapter 13 plan is kind of similar to debt settlement, but in a more formalized process. You submit a plan to repay your debts. You could actually be required to pay 100% of your debt back. So going through a bankruptcy helps if you can't pay your house and your mortgage or your home, and that's going to be foreclosed. You can file an emergency petition to try to get that stayed or stopped. And the Chapter 13 can allow you some breathing room to repay the debts. It usually takes between 3 and 5 years, which is the difference between a 13 and a 7. The 7 again being shorter, and the 13 being a longer process. You are under the control of the bankruptcy trustee, and that's a federal judge as well. And they will look at everything that you're spending and doing and where your money is coming and going. And just because you want to help out your family member, that may not be okay with the bankruptcy court. So if you have a small business, or you have a business, or there's some complications with your finances, bankruptcy doesn't necessarily may not make sense for you. And that's something to really consider about, whether you want to open up the Pandora's box. There are lots of ways to avoid bankruptcy, and I personally recommend that bankruptcy be considered as a last resort. It just has so far-reaching consequences, and frankly, if you work with the right person, if you came to my office and you find the right people to work with, or you find the right people to work with, somebody who's really super savvy and really understands finances and debt will be able to help you come up with a plan that makes sense to help you get out of debt with the minimal amount of impact to your finances, your cash flow, your assets, your tax consequences, and obviously the legal end of it. So those are basically the two types of bankruptcy. There's also a Chapter 11, but it's really used more in business type of debt situations when you're looking to reorganize. So for today's discussion, the 7 and the 13 are really more appropriate. And again, that bankruptcy falls under a debt consolidation umbrella because it is a form of debt consolidation, however extreme that one might think it is. So again, when we're looking at debt consolidation as a whole or an umbrella, and you're looking at the different options of debt consolidation and helping yourself get out of debt, you have to look at the pros and cons, not just the general pros and cons, but again, as I reiterate this piece of the puzzle, it has to relate to you and you as a person. You might be single, you might be married, you might have one child, no children, you might be having a baby, you might have student loans, you're building a business, you might own a home, you might not, you might be helping out family members. There are so many different factors that go into the decision of how to get yourself out of debt. And really, that's why you have to intimately know what's happening with your personal finances. So some of the pros and cons that I think are super important to know are in terms of debt consolidation, and the differences is that most people are looking to lower their interest rate. If you can't do it on your own by making that phone call to the creditor and saying, hey, what can you do for me? Then possibly looking into a debt consolidation loan is an option. Remember that when you take out a loan, though, loans aren't free. They may say that there's no upfront costs and there's no fees upfront, but loans are generally not free. So as a rule, if you were going to take a $10,000 loan, there's something called the net proceeds. The net proceeds are actually the distributed amount of the funds. You're going to want to know what the net proceeds of any loan is, because that tells you the difference between what you were taking and any fees. So the net proceeds of a particular loan from $10,000 might be $9,990. So, under that circumstance, it was $10, but it might be $9,000. So as the net proceeds, which means $1,000 went somewhere, and you kind of want to know where that went. And it's definitely going to be in there somewhere. So the other piece of the debt consolidation puzzle is you want to make sure the interest rate is a locked and fixed interest rate. There are two types of interest rates. One's a variable and one is fixed. And they are basically what they sound. Fixed, it doesn't change, and variable varies. And the variable rate will vary with some sort of factor that's making the rate change. You want to know what that factor is, how often it changes. What happened recently with a lot of people's HELOC is a home equity line of credit, was that it was interest only. And that was great until it recalculated. And then all of a sudden, interest only plus principal. When you're taking out a loan, you want to understand what it is that you're paying. Are you paying the interest? Are you paying part of the principal? What part of it are you paying and when? And understanding when that interest rate is going to recalculate, if it's going to recalculate, because you don't want any surprises. If you're budgeting and you have a certain amount of money to spend towards that every month, you certainly wouldn't want to be blindsided by the fact that something else comes up. Okay. With that said, and that's really a con, a downside to some debt consolidation loans, variable interest rates, a balloon payment at the end. You want to make sure that there's no, let's say, 10-year payment, and then after the 10th-year payment, you are then required to pay off the loan. So you have to understand the terms of the loan. And I'm going to warn, that don't just go by whatever the person said to you. Really try to understand and read the documents. I know if you're not an attorney, it seems very complicated and overwhelming, but I'm going to give you a tip that my contract professor in law school gave me when reading contracts. Read it very slowly, word by word, punctuation by punctuation. So stop at the commas, circle the words you don't understand, and look them up. So, and it's super important to do that because some debt consolidation loans have some far-reaching effects. So, for example, if you got a loan through a credit union, you might find that there's some terminology in there that basically states that other debts and other assets could become secured with the taking out of that loan. You wouldn't even know it's there. It's one or two sentences. And you wouldn't want to be surprised if you had trouble paying that loan that all of a sudden they could go after your car, or they could go after bank accounts or other pieces of the puzzle that you had no idea were connected to that particular loan. So read the loan. If you don't understand the loan, take it to somebody. Honestly, pay somebody a consultation fee and a contract attorney or somebody who has that type of background to read it for you. It's worth it. Even if you paid a couple $100s, it would save you money in the end because you definitely want to know. The key pieces of a puzzle when you're looking at loans is you definitely want to look at the default terminology. I know that sounds crazy. Why would I look at the default terminology when I don't intend on defaulting? You may not intend on defaulting, but you want to know anyway what it is that they could do to you. So be super careful. Things can be found in there like what's called a confession of judgment, which means you've already agreed to a judgment by taking on the loan if you default. That means you bypass the entire legal system and you have no recourse. That would be terrible, and that would be a lot of expense if you came to me with such a loan and you said, Leslie, I can't pay my loan, but I found out that I have a confession of judgment. What do we do? So that would be much more complicated and be more costly. So again, sometimes penny wise and pound foolish, spend a little money up front to understand what you're signing. So I caution you when you're looking at those debt consolidation loans, where they're coming from, who's giving you the money, the terminology, the interest rate, if it's variable or if it's fixed, any other factors that would impact you from your bank accounts to confession of judgments. Debt settlement. So again, I'm a huge fan of debt settlement. This is what I do for a living. It is super, super successful. It is not for everybody. And I'm really clear about that when clients call my office or potential clients call up. It's not for everybody. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. You may not even be able to afford it, number one, and you may not be able to have some of the risk factors that are involved with debt settlement. Or two, you are not in a position where you feel comfortable that you have to make certain sacrifices to make the debt settlement piece work. If you are, it is incredibly successful. You can reduce hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to a fraction of the percentages. But I want to say this very clearly. You cannot reduce debt to pennies on the dollar. It doesn't exist. And there's a lot of information out there that says you can settle your own debt, negotiate it. You can get pennies on the dollar. Just tell the creditor you're going to file bankruptcy. None of that works. None of it works. You can't threaten bankruptcy because they'll just wait for you to file or not. Then you'll have no credibility. You can try to settle it on your own, but there's lots of nuances, like them wanting post-dated checks, not giving you documents in writing, not actually getting rid of the debt. Lots of nuances there you want to be careful with. So I don't recommend trying to do it on your own. But once you're finished with the process, if you do choose to go down this road, your debt's completely gone. It's absolutely gone. I could tell you that most of my clients tell me their credit score goes way back into the 700s. So it's not a complete and utter trashing of your credit. It's not a foreclosure. It is not a repossession of a car. It is where you are stopping to pay. So it'll be reported on your credit report that you're behind. The account gets negotiated and settled. Paperwork comes. The payment is made. When the payment is finished, follow-up paperwork gets sent, and then the credit report gets reported again. And when that reporting comes, that's what really is the key to not only getting you out of debt, but also improving your credit score at the same time. It could be lengthy, it can go anywhere from 3 to 5 years. It does have a lot of flexibility. You can increase your payment at any time. Another red flag, if you're going to talk to any debt settlement company and they take money up front from you, whether they take a percentage of it every month or otherwise, not the company you want to be working with. Nobody should be taking money up front from you for fees on debt settlement before they negotiate a settlement. One, it's illegal, and two, there's no incentive for them to do the work. So be aware of that. Don't get scammed on it. And so if you're in the know, you'll know exactly what you need to do. We talked a lot about the credit counseling, about the pros and cons of it. Again, it could take a little while. It doesn't mean that the debt is discharged, and not every creditor works with it, and it is reported on your credit. You can get some educational advice on it, and it's done by not-for-profits. But again, we talked a little bit about not-for-profits. Bankruptcy, again, the pros and cons of it. We talked about those when the bankruptcy slide first came up. Generally, you get them discharged, but it will stay on your credit for quite a long time. It can help you if you need to save your home or other things that you, like your car or other things that you, assets that you don't want to be impacted. Not all debts are discharged. We still say student loans are non-dischargeable in bankruptcy because it's super rare to see that. I do believe, as a side note, that case that just came up is likely going to be overturned. So I wouldn't jump on that bandwagon anytime soon. And it doesn't necessarily address the underlying issue of your financial problem, which could just be cash flow. And if your cash flow is off, you can end up back in the same position, and bankruptcy will not be an option because you can't file bankruptcy again for a good 7 to 10 years. So what option is right for you? The option that's right for you has to belong to you. So ask yourself, what's going on with my finances? Do I have too much credit card debt? Is my housing expense out of control? Do I not understand my student loans? If you don't understand student loans, get a consult with somebody like myself who can explain that to you. There's a lot of pop-up student loan companies these days looking to help people. First of all, a lot of this federal stuff is easy to figure out on your own. And two, again, you want to understand the background of that person. I mean, working with somebody who, just took a financial coaching course on helping with student loans or help themselves and then wants to help you doesn't mean that they have the requisite experience that makes sense. There's a lot of nuances in there. Tax issues, even with student loans, tax issues with credit counseling and potentially bankruptcy. So your credit report, how to manage that. So again, you have to know what's really going to be best for you and what you're going to be willing to tolerate and whether it's going to achieve your goals. And again, understanding your goals is the key to making the right possible decision. If you're not sure what your goals are, that's okay. A lot of clients come to me and they're not sure what the problem is. They just know that they're not getting anywhere paying their bills. They have a lot of debt. They don't really understand it, and they're not sure what to do with it. So, or they're paying it and it's just not, it's not going anywhere. So it's okay if you're not really sure what the problem is. It's okay if you can't diagnose it and you're really unsure of where to go with it. We work with clients like that all the time. Don't be ashamed and embarrassed. There's no judgment certainly in my office whatsoever. We understand debt happens, and it's not something that you either grew up with or understood, or it hit you suddenly, or you had a life event that impacted it. There's no shame in accepting the fact that it's not your area of expertise and you just don't know. So when I don't understand something, I go to an expert. So if you don't understand the financial part, there's no shame in that. It's okay. Go to somebody who does understand it and help them explain it to you so that you can make better decisions. And I think that's really the key. You want a partnership in figuring out what option is right for you. All right, so I'll talk 2 seconds about credit reports and credit scores. A FICO score is not your credit score. It's one scoring model. There are 3 different scores that get compiled. Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax are the 3 reporting bureaus. Not every creditor reports to them. That's why the scores you have to look at all 3 of them if you're going to manage your credit report. Again, if you don't understand how to read your credit report, get somebody to help you. It's not easy necessarily to understand. I do strongly believe in credit monitoring. 1, fraud prevention, number 1, and 2, you got to be in the know. Know if somebody checked your credit. Lots of services out there through your bank, through a credit card company. There's a lot of reliable services that will alert you when something happens to your credit. You want to be in the know. You want to know what's on your credit report. Remember to check it at least once a year. Find someone to help you read through it so you make sure that you understand what's impacting your score. What's impacting your score may not be impacting my score. How to bring the score up. And there is no blanket, I'm going to dispute something and it's coming off my credit report, so don't get caught up in that concept either. Okay, questions, how to contact me and the Tayne Law Group. We're on all social media, so I really encourage you to follow us. Certainly at Instagram, you can DM me anytime. Please take a look. and follow us. We always put great tips out there and lots of interesting stuff that's always going on. And I'll suggest that we take it away to questions.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. I'll remind everyone you can email your question to info@savvyladies.org, or if you're logged in here, you can use the chat box. And I'm going to hand it over to Lisa, our Executive Director, for a second.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you about NFCC, the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, because I know on their website you put in your zip code and they direct you to a not-for-profit organization that you addressed earlier on to help you with your debt, and then they have their criteria. Can you just talk about if that is a reasonable sort of thing to do for some people?
So I don't know the NFCC that well. They just may be an organization that tells people to go look at certain things. So I can't really comment on them in particular, and I would certainly never say anything negative about any organization ever. But what I can tell you is that consumer credit counseling is one way of managing debt. It's not necessarily the best way or the only way. And so they may send you to different organizations, but I can't state the reliability of the organizations that they're sending them to, since I'm not really that familiar even with them. Consumer credit counseling, in my experience, when I'm dealing with people who have debt problems, isn't always the best way to get your debt resolved. If you're looking to resolve debt, if you're looking to manage it, that may be a good option for you. But again, before looking into it and being able to do that, and I can just pull it up. Yeah. You said NFCC is it .org or .com?
It's .org. So, because I think there is this kind of misunderstanding that there's some magical place you can go to get rid of your debt.
There isn't.
And that somebody with much better negotiating skills will reach out to your creditors and talk them, into lowering your credit score or lowering your commitment. And I think that's some of the commercials on TV and some of the stuff that you see online, certainly, like you addressed earlier, it, sort of puts that out there like they can magically fix something for people.
Okay, you brought up some great points. I love it. So there is no magic wand that you can wave and say, this is it. So be super careful in what you hear on the radio, TV, and when you get mailings in the mail, like they know something about you. So they know your credit score, they know a creditor, they feel you're going to be sued. So, that's a member organization from what I saw. So membership means that you have to pay for it. So, right. And you want to be super careful about letting just somebody or some organization contact your creditors. Once you've given that authorization to do that, you can trigger a number of events that may not be in your best interest. What are they doing when they talk to them? Why do you need them to talk to them about reducing your interest rates? So you can call them up and you can talk to a creditor about reducing your interest rates. What is it that you are trying to achieve? If the debt is overwhelming and you're having difficulty paying your debt, then you need to talk to somebody about something a different type of program. If you're just looking at your interest rates and you really don't know how to manage money and that program makes sense, then okay. But I want you to be super careful about the idea that somebody can reduce your debt, that somebody can dispute debt for you, that they can make promises on your credit report, that your credit score will go up. Let us help you increase your credit score. Let us help you with your tax issues. We've resolved other debts for other people. First of all, none of that is verifiable. And second of all, there are lots of implications. I could tell you, once you call a creditor and you have somebody talking to them, unless that person knows what they're saying, they could trigger all kinds of things. They could trigger lawsuits. They could trigger cutting off your available credit. They could trigger closing your card. They could trigger all different things. So you don't want just anybody contacting your creditors with blanket letters. And you certainly don't want people disputing debts that are actually valid, that are then going to set off other legal issues by you doing that. So be super careful about the advertisements that you see and that you hear. My recommendation is to talk to a real professional, somebody who can make a referral to you and talk about what your issues are and who's going to be able to explain not just their service, but the other services that are out there. So one of the things that we do in my practice is we talk about bankruptcy. We can talk about the consumer credit counseling, and we can say to a client, this is why it works for you or why it wouldn't work for you, and this is what we would recommend. And that's somebody who's looking out for your best interest. Somebody who's on the phone and says to you, oh, I can get this done for you and we'll get your debt settled, or we'll reduce your interest rates, or we'll get you out of debt. I mean, who are they and why are they telling you that? And what is the process for them to do that? And is who you're talking to the people who are actually going to do the work? Because many times those 800 numbers that you call is going to a call center. And that call center, the first call goes to company A, the second call goes to company B, the third goes to C, and whoever picks up the phone is dealing with different call centers. The reason why I know that is because I've been in this business over 20 years. Those companies have solicited me to buy leads from them. So I know that there are people selling your information, and those lead generation companies, which may just be the television ad or the ad you got in the mail, may be selling your information to multiple different debt consolidation type of companies that are going to try to sell you. So it's a big business. You want to work and make sure that who you're working with knows you. Everything is done in-house. No money up front, and no blanket promises. The only promises we tell clients that we can make is that we will do our absolute very best for you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks very much. Because I know it's a huge issue, and I think it's an issue because debt comes with it so much shame and also fear.
Yes.
That people get a little desperate, and then they really do look for that magic wand to sort of fix the problem for them. So,
and that's why I say to people, there's no shame in having debt. Everybody has had it at some point in their life. I had student loan debt when I graduated from law school. It happens. People get into debt for a million different reasons. There's no shame in it. Don't be frightened by somebody like myself because I'm an attorney. People get, attorney's going to cost me a lot of money and I don't need a lawyer. You know what? It's the best person to go to because I understand every aspect of it. So don't be afraid of it. But if your gut doesn't feel good about what you're hearing or reading or seeing, then go with your gut instinct. If you're really unsure, then there's a reason why you're unsure, and move on. Take your time. Don't be desperate. There's no pressure to do this. I always tell clients that there is absolutely no pressure. The only time there is pressure is if you've been sued and then we have a time frame to respond, or you have a judgment against you. Those are different time frames. But as a general rule, if you're struggling with debt, you can't pay the bills. Okay, so you can't pay the bills. Nothing's going to happen. You're not going to go to jail. You're not a bad person. And take your time and try to put it a little bit aside and try to get some good information when your head is feeling that clear.
Great, thanks. So we have a couple more questions.
Okay, Leslie, we have a question about medical debt and wanting to understand if that's separate from the debt that you talked about, or if, like example, if it's forgiven on bankruptcy, or if it's, just kind of different or treated the same.
So medical debt is, it can be forgiven in a bankruptcy, sure. I wouldn't bankrupt out $5,000 or $10,000. I mean, if you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that does happen. I personally recently had a surgery and it was over $100,000. So, if you have debts of those type of numbers, you could be talking about a bankruptcy option. Medical debt's a little bit different than credit card and other debt. I wouldn't take a loan for paying medical debt, and I'll tell you why. Usually with medical debt, they're super cooperative about there's no interest, and if it's with a hospital, you can pay them $10, $20 a month, a real small amount of money that works within your budget. If it's with a doctor's office and it ends up with an attorney's office, then you got to come to me. But if it's regular medical debt, my recommendation is if it already went through your insurance company and that's the end of the line and you have, let's say, $1,000 bill, then I would call up the person or the agency or the firm who's handling it, and I would say, can I pay you Figure out your budget. Don't ever make agreements that you can't stick to. So don't say, I maybe be able to pay. Before you make the phone call, figure out, all right, I can afford $25 a month. I can afford $75 a month, and call them up. Most medical debts, they're super happy to just get paid. So find yourself in that kind of position. See if you can work out a payment plan. Again, it'll be interest-free, and they're usually not reported on your credit report. It can be reported on your credit report if you were sued, because that's public record, so that would show up. But medical debt is slightly different. You don't have an expectation also of settling medical debt like you could with a credit card or a loan. Medical debt, usually, you're not going to be looking at, 50 cents on the dollar again, because if it's with the hospital or a provider, they'll usually just take a payment. If you really can't pay it and you have a lot of debt, a lot of medical debt, and the insurance company wasn't covering it or you had no insurance, then certainly bankruptcy could be an option for you.
Okay, great, thanks. Another question is saying, I'm worried about my debt and also need someone to review my financial planning or lack thereof. Is this something that you can help with? So maybe Leslie, you could just talk about what your company does.
Yep. So what we do is we would take a look at, when you call us up, we have a whole series of questions we're going to ask you. It takes like 5 minutes, kind of to give me a background information, what's going on, if you're working, how much income you have, your debts, whether they're being paid, things like that. And then we want to talk a little bit about your goals. What is it that you're looking to achieve, and how will some of the goals be impacted by the decisions that we would make? So that's the really key to the relationship that we have with our clients, is the communication and letting you know that, okay, so if your goal is to get out of debt and you have $50,000 in credit card debt, and that's really the biggest issue, if we change the budget on that and we reduce that over a course of 24 to 48 months, how does that now impact you overall? Does that give you the breathing room that you need to really focus on your day-to-day life? So absolutely, we work on a strategy. We look at the overall picture. We talk about different options that might work, and then we work together in a partnership so that the solution for you is within your lifestyle and your comfort level.
Okay, comment of that's very helpful. Thank you. And I think this is the last question, which is asking about if you can give a ballpark number for debt settlement pricing, just kind of what to expect for that to cost.
Okay, so there's two kind of different numbers in debt settlement. One is whether a company is going to tell you what they're going to settle your debts at for. There is no such thing as 20, 30, 40 cents on the dollar anymore. Very rarely, unless you have a very severe hardship. And the inability to pay, just so you know, is not a hardship. So those are the percentages in terms of resolving debt, anywhere from 30 to 75% of the debt. As far as fees go, there should be no fees up front. So the way it works is, certainly from my firm, is we come up with a budget for you, and we say, okay, you have $50,000 worth or $25,000 worth of debt. Here are some payment options, and does this fit within your budget? The payment option corresponds with a time frame. So the higher the payment, the faster the process, which means there's more funds available to pay creditors faster. The lower the payment, the longer the process. I actually normally recommend the longer process with the lowest possible payment in order to give clients some breathing room to, get caught up on your day-to-day expenses and not feel like you're choking. And then you can always increase your payment or send in additional funds. There's no prepayment penalties and there's no interest, since it's not a loan. So that budgeted amount might be anywhere from $250 a month up to $600, $700 a month, depending on, again, what your income is and your comfort level. Everything's included in your payment. There's no billing. There's no upfront fees, like there's no settlement fees up front. So when we give the payment amount, it includes everything. It includes the payment to the creditor and any of our fees, which are not taken. Our settlement fees are not taken until we resolve the debt. So that means we negotiate the settlement with the creditor. We get a letter from the creditor. We then pay the creditor, and then we take our fees, a small amount out of that payment every single month, so that you're not impacted and you don't get any bills. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, I believe so. Do you have time for one more question that just came in?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, this one is asking, what recourse does a person have to get funds back from a company that has taken fees up front, or they've deposited funds with the company, but the company has done nothing and they desire to move on? And
Okay.
it says this question relates to debt settlement.
Yeah, no doubt it does. So absolutely. So that's the problem with these companies, that getting the money back is so difficult. So here's the thing. If you have made payments by ACH, automatic clearinghouse transfer from your bank account, you can go to your bank and you can ask them to reverse the payments that were paid in the last, depends on the bank's policy, 30, 60, or even 90 days, you might be able to get the money back. So ask the bank to reverse the payment. You can also write a letter and say that you wish to, you no longer want to be a client, you are demanding an accounting, and you would like a refund of that. Many people come to us after they've been with these companies that have done that to them and gotten them nowhere. And we have some information that we can provide to you on how to try to get the money back, and some of the recourse that you might have depending on where they're located. You might be able to go, filing an attorney general complaint is important, and also with the CFPB, those are important, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get your money back. But it does help in the process of receiving complaints, because at that point in time, perhaps they will look into it. But the immediate issue of getting your money back, go to your bank and try to get the payments reversed, and send a demand letter in writing, certified mail, fax, and email, demanding the money back.
Okay, great tips. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
I believe those are all the questions that we have. So I want to thank you again for a really excellent presentation. Thanks for clearly explaining everything to us today. And I want to thank everyone for joining us and asking questions as well. We hope you'll join us again. So thank you so much, Leslie. It was really great.
Yeah, it was really great. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you so much for having me. And with the last question, we can help with that. And so if somebody's with a situation that they're really uncomfortable with, and they're, reach out to me and we'll make some suggestions.
Okay, great. And we will be sending Leslie's contact information over email as well if you didn't get to write it down. So thanks again.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.